First off, I want to apologize that I don't actually have gameplay for this character. We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way and just go over their stats, skills, and effects, and the NP damage calculations the raw and real way. My pulls on this banner have been going atrociously bad. I'm not really complaining because I did manage to get Ruler, Scotty, and Lowhigh pretty easily, so at one point my pulls were going to start going horrifically bad. But again, I want to apologize because usually we have gameplay and stuff in the background so you can actually see the character performing in the background while I'm actually talking about them and bringing up their stats and skills. But yeah, just apologizes in advance. I've been getting just absolutely butt blasted on this banner. But we have King Ahsoka. If you don't know, he's new on the JP side of things. He's coming out on the Metatron Jean banner, and then he's going to be coming out on the next character's banner. Won't say too much about her. And then we also have a super secret saucy third banner where he's allegedly going to be on that as well. So if you're pulling for any of these characters, you're probably going to get this guy along the way, unless you just have terrible luck like me and I'm like 7 multis deep and haven't seen a single gold character. I'm not salty, I promise, but I really like how this guy is built. Is he the most, like, cracked little 4-star guy in the game? Probably not, but is he going to be really good for people that need to do, like, multi-core farming, or if you just want to bring a guy to CQs? Yeah, he's going to be really nice for all those, because this guy kind of functions as a DPS support-type character, and I guess for these type of videos, since we're just kind of, like, looking at all of his stats and skills, we'll just start going in order. Skill 1 over here is just a nice party charisma, right? Everybody's getting 20% arts, 20% buster, and 20% NP damage, right? It's just a very nice blanketed skill. Once again, quick characters kind of shafted a little bit because if you don't know what a multi-core setup is, it's where you generally have 2 DPSs, probably because you're going through a 90 plus or more than likely a 90 plus node, and you need one of your guys to take out one node and the other guy to take out the other 2, right? You need to kind of swap between them because either they can't loop as good or there's a weird blend of single target and AoE enemies, and like maybe there's a guy with like 2 enemies on one node and the arts or quick character can't loop it properly, whatever have you, right? Or you just need to mix up your power mods or something along those lines. NA players are probably more and more familiar with this concept as we're starting to get more and more 90 plus quests. But this is really nice because it does mean that any of your arts and buster characters that you're bringing for those type of nodes are going to be getting a nice little damage buff from this, not only from their arts and buster cards, and specifically for arts, this also helps them with their NP looping, but also just raw NP damage. If Oberon is in your future, right, he's going to be really good in these team comps because any little additional NP damage you can give the characters, especially if they don't have it, helps them out tremendously, right? You guys know that I love using Morgan, not a bit of NP damage on that character, so sometimes with Oberon it doesn't feel like she's quite doing as much damage as some of the other buster characters because they come loaded with NP damage. But King Ahsoka over here is going to fix those issues. So already off rip, skill 1 on an arts AoE character that is giving 3 solid buffs, and well, more than likely 2 because your arts character is probably not going to use the buster card and the buster character is probably not going to use the arts cards, but you get my drift. They're getting 2 solid buffs on this one. Just a phenomenal start, and pretty much everything on this guy is going to be helping out the party. This is one, though, that I really enjoy because you guys know that I am a fan of Jalter, and one of the best effects that Jalter has is the buff block on her NP. Well, this guy just says, anytime I just attack, doesn't have to be a crit, doesn't have to be with my buster cards, my arts cards, it doesn't matter, just when I attack, anytime for 3 turns, not even attack based, I'm gonna hit the enemy with an instance of buff block. And buff block is insanely strong going into boss fights because there are some skills that pack numerous different effects into said skill, and this just negates the whole thing. It might as well just say, like, negate one enemy skill activation, or negate any buffs that an enemy's going to give themselves on break bar. I think the most famous example of this that probably everybody's done is the Chi Chi Huang fight in Lost Belt 3. If you have Jalter, you know, he'll pop his break bar, try to give himself some buffs. Jalter says, nah, you're not doing that. He's like, all right, I'm going to pop my NP, give myself like 50 different effects, and she says, nope, not happening there, little buddy, no buffs for you. So this is already immensely powerful going into any of these boss fights because it's just going to shut them down. It's going to make things a lot more manageable because you've probably seen as you've been playing through the game that whenever you break these enemies' bars, they usually give themselves some buffs. I think the only thing this doesn't really get around are effects that just charge your NP, right? If they have like charge NP to max whenever you break their bar, or if they have a skill that it gives them a bit of like extra NP ticks. I don't think it blocks those things, but pretty much everything else it can help you get around, while also giving himself 30% attack, 30% crit. Just nice. Just free damage, free crit damage. It's nice to have. It's not the most insane. He's not going to be like your greatest critter of all time, but he has it in there, right? You know, it makes him a little bit better when it comes to doing damage with his face cards, but that's always good to see. It's better to have these effects than to not have them. And then his final skill over here is kind of like the little utility skill. He's just doing a lot on this. Like, this is just a lot of very good things. It's not a party-wide battery, but still 30% for him, and as an arts character, 30% is more than likely going to be fine for most of your looping purposes. 15 stars every turn for 3 turns, really crazy. It just means he's providing stars not only for himself, but the entire party, giving everybody 30% debuff resistance. Doesn't sound like that much, but then you factor in a character's own innate debuff resistance, maybe the resistance on their passive, so he technically has 50% with this up. That's like a coin flip chance to just negate any debuffs that are coming his way. Even more so on other characters that might have like magic resistance plus like goddess core or something along those lines. Some characters can start getting upwards of like 30, 40, 50% innate debuff resistance, just really strong. And then it gives you 30% critical attack resistance for 3 turns. So overall skill set is you have the party damage skill, the party utility skill, and then you have his little damage critty skill, right? I do also want to bring this up over here that he has his true name discernment. This is a new passive skill that increases his, well, I mean, you can see it right there, but it basically gives him like 10% resistance against enemy NPs. I don't really think it's going to matter too much, because most of the times when you're about to get bopped by an NP, you're going to die regardless, but it might help out in scenarios in, say, like advanced quest or some challenge quest where the enemies aren't like the highest level and they don't do that much damage. Like there's some challenge quests where enemies will spam their NPs, but that's because they don't hit very hard. Could be kind of nice for that. We'll see if it crops, if it ends up being relevant. But he also has like no defensive buffs. Like he doesn't give himself defense, dodge, damage cut, invincibility, nothing along those lines. But you know, so we'll see how well he's able to tank NPs as, you know, time goes on. But on the no survivability buffs, he's an arts character, so you can get away with not having it. Obviously, I prefer if he did have some way to keep himself alive, but he's in really good hands with people like Lady Avalon, with Castoria. I mean, you even know that because he's rocking double arts, double buster, he works in things like the Immortal team comp, so Merlin's really good in those team compositions if you don't have like Lady Avalon or something, so he'll be fine. He'll be chilling as long as you have the appropriate servants. Now, the thing where he starts to get interesting is he is rocking double power mods against evil and demonic. That's fine, that's whatever. But if there's only one enemy on the field, he gets 50% NP damage. So they're trying to plug up the holes in this character, or I guess if you want to bring him to a challenge quest and he's like the only guy you've got for it, but he's an AoE, so it doesn't do as much damage because, you know, AoE versus single targets are going to hit harder. They're trying to give him a little bit of an out into some of those fights, which I think is interesting, right? Because it fixes some of the issues with being an AoE character. And then, I mean, he's also reducing their defense by 20% for 3 turns, so every subsequent NP is going to do more and more damage. We'll kind of look at that in a second. But just to pull over, I have like the calcs all pulled up for him. This is kind of baseline. So this is with his 20% arts buff for his NP, the 30% attack buff, base 20% NP damage, 21,000, not a whole lot. Like that's not super good. Ignore the Vitra. This is his stats and everything I put in here. This is the same scaling, all that good stuff. It's just, you know, King Ahsoka's not in the database yet, so I didn't have the chance to put him in. But yeah, these are what all of his stats look like. So this is kind of how hard he would be hitting. This is what his damage would kind of look like. But then, you know, we look at it with his power mod, you know, let's go ahead and just plug in the 30%. Let's just not high roll and say that we find a guy that's evil and demonic, even though I think that's kind of likely. Then he jumps up to 27. Like, that's fine. Like, this is a respectable number for an NP1 character, just to kind of like get some basis of where that's at. That's kind of like your Britomart without power mod. That's like hitting Oreshkigal, no power mod damage, right? He's hitting harder than Vitro, right? I mean, he's already hitting about the same as Vitro without the power mod, and then he's hitting about the same with the power mod. So, like, you know, it's like a nice 4-star option to a 5-star character. Like, that's not terrible. It could certainly be worse. Things start to get a little bit more interesting, though, whenever you're fighting one enemy, because then this shoots up to 70%, and now we're actually at a pretty decent number. Now, is this replacing any of your single targets? Not really, but you are getting to that level of damage, right? You're starting to hit close to some of these single target characters. Not that these are like the most impressive single targets like Kiyohime Lancer or Raiko Lancer, but it kind of shows you that you're now getting in that low single target damage. The weird part is there's really no way to use this or like abuse it when there's like multiple people around, because you know he's an AoE character. But it is interesting. I like this idea that we're giving these AoE characters some way to deal with nodes that only have one enemy on them, or to finish out a fight where it might be, say, a farming node for a 90++ where there's like 2 enemies, 3 enemies, and then one guy at the very end that's like super huge. It does give you kind of an out for finishing out those fights. And then I guess just for like giggles, because we all like seeing big number go up, if you can get both of his power mods against one enemy, 41,000. I mean, still not hitting harder than Medusa Lily, but I mean, we are kind of getting into the realm of decent single targets at that point, right? So what's the verdict on this guy? Well, I think at NP1, he's not doing anything super special. You'll probably use him as like a multi-core guy, kind of like Kurohime that we got earlier on this year, where it's a character that can fill a role in some farming comps, but is mostly going to be your off-to-the-side character, your secondary DPS for those. But then as you start to get higher NP copies of the guy, I mein, he is a 4-star that's on some pretty popular banners. I mean, if you're not interested in Gamer John over there, and you're not interested in we're just gonna call him the lady, because I'm trying to avoid spoiling things for people, but the lady over there, the suspicious individual, you're gonna probably pull a couple of copies of King Ahsoka over here. And let's also not deny, the guy's pretty dope looking, so like you're probably gonna want to cop some copies of him. I think he looks dope. Okay, well, I'll only say that. So like, if you do walk away with a couple of copies, then he could be a really strong option in your multi-core setups, and I think that's a pretty good position for him to be in. As a 4-star character, he doesn't have to be carrying the game, he doesn't have to be the best character in the game, he just got to be a solid option. You know, that's why he's a banner unit. And so the fact that he's kind of filling that role, I think, rather accurately, I like to see that, right? Obviously, I will need to sit down and actually play with this guy a little bit more and actually get my grubby little mitts on him. But from what I'm seeing, and you know, from the calculations that we're doing over here, you know, the math don't lie, he's going to be doing okay damage. You know, I'm not going into these things expecting him to be the strongest character of all time, right? And again, this is like kind of a best of all possible worlds, but at least for the NP damage, you just have to be fighting one guy. That's pretty free. You can almost treat that as like free extra damage if you know there's going to be one enemy. And then, you know, evil and demonic, those aren't like the craziest power mods, but you know, like there are characters in here. There's some dudes. You know, we got some guys in here, especially if you're trying to bring them with advantage. Now, with the advantage a little less so, because, I mean, look, your archer options aren't exactly exploding all over the place, but you got a ton of berserkers, and then you also have a ton of extra class people, and that's actually really solid, because if you don't have options of taking these guys out, say for whatever reason you're fighting Rasputin, you don't have a moon cancer to take him out, you haven't gotten the free BB, well, this can kind of be like your free neutral guy to take people like that out. It's just kind of nice, just kind of neat. There are also like, I mean, none of these are really like free quest enemies, but hey, they're like kind of there. There's like some of these guys that do pop up every now and then. Demonic, not as many servants, but then you get a decent chunk of free quest enemies. So like, again, gives them some nice balance. You're not really going to be clocking this very much. You're not going to be stacking these on top of each other, but hey, you know, like when you do, it'll be really nice. You'll be hitting his peak, but then, you know, most of the time you're probably proccing one of these two, doing some decent damage. I like the guy. I think he's a pretty solid character. I would not be upset if they would like to bless him into my Chaldea, but, you know, then again, we actually have to get lucky on our polls, so I'll probably update you guys on how that is going. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Again, real sorry that I don't have any background footage for this one. Kind of in a rush this morning, and was trying last night to find people to use this on the friends list, but nobody had pulled this guy. I was already struggling to find the Metatron Jean, and so I was like, dude, I'm just not going to be able to find any of these King Ahsokas. And then my own polls are going horrifically bad. So it's like, we're just gonna have to do this the bootleg way, but hopefully the insight and kind of the analysis of the character was good enough to oversee that. You know, it was able to supersede the lack of gameplay, or maybe you were just watching this in the background while you were I don't know, you were playing Helldivers or something. I don't know, you're driving to work or something along those lines. So the visuals didn't even affect you at all. You were just like, bro, I wasn't even looking at the video. But with that being said, a like on the video would be appreciated. Subscribe to the channel for that daily FGO content, and make sure you keep those links down in the description down below. If you need help with FGO or really any different gacha game, we got a Discord server down there. I'd be tweeting sometimes if you want to follow that. And then we also got the Patreon if you want to, you know, support the channel and get a couple of bonus content. I mean, mostly you get access to like a Discord channel where like I'm working on videos and kind of just yapping in general. And then there's also some Patreon exclusive videos that come out whenever they bug me for a Patreon exclusive video. And I'm like, all right, well, just tell me what you want to make and I'll make it literally right now. Oh yeah, there's also the Twitch where I'm going to be streaming more starting next week. I really want to get into streaming stuff like Wuwa and what's the other game called? Nike. I want to try that again. So that way I can have other people tell me about the game and I don't have to learn anything about it, right? Everybody can mentor me on what I'm supposed to do instead of actually sitting down and reading. Because, look, as an FGO player, I hate reading.